This is the first program in the Supervisory Practices series. It is an introduction to supervision. There has been a persistent and growing interest during the past 2 decades in the human problems of the work situation. One aspect of this concern revolves around the supervisor-employee relationship, and in particular, how the supervisor is to act in order to maximize production as well as encourage and motivate the employee. The purpose of this course is to introduce you to the basic practices and functions of the first-line supervisor. The basic functions of a supervisor consist of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling the activities of personnel. The way a supervisor handles these responsibilities will vary to some extent depending on the individual involved, but the basic responsibilities are the same. Supervising is a complex and difficult task because it involves the management of human activity. For this reason, simple approaches such as treating one's employees as you would like to be treated, or dealing with situations only as they arise, are not enough to create an effective supervisory process. Besides organizing and directing employee activity, what are the other basic supervisory functions? Although all of the primary supervisory functions will be discussed throughout the course, their basic meaning should be defined. Planning is the function which determines ahead of time what is to be accomplished. This is performed in terms of the goals, policies, and procedures and other plans needed to attain the desired objective. Organizing simply means the decision as to how work will be divided in order to accomplish the planned objective. The supervisor delegates various responsibilities for the work at hand, establishes various structural or organizational frameworks within the department to make sure that work flows smoothly, and make sure that the proper materials are on hand. A supervisor also directs the activities of employees. This is done by guiding, teaching, motivating, or similar activities. This function includes issuing orders and instructions to subordinates and stimulating them to do their work effectively. Directing is probably the most time-consuming function of a supervisor. Do you think that the supervisor of a purchasing department and an automobile production line supervisor would have the same basic functions? Of course. The fourth fundamental activity of the supervisor is controlling those activities that are basic to the achievement of the planned objectives. Controlling, however, goes beyond checking progress towards goals. It also includes taking action to correct possible deviations from the work plan. All of these functions are interrelated. For example, you cannot check to make sure that the proper parts are being manufactured if you do not have a complete work plan to refer to. Which function is most time-consuming? The rest of this program will be devoted to describing some of the topics which we'll cover in this series. All of these topics, however, will be built on a knowledge of these basic supervisory functions. For example, which characteristic do you think a supervisor must have if he or she is going to carry out these functions efficiently? Correct. Authority is expressed in many ways, but without it, a supervisor will accomplish little. You will see later, for example, that the expression of authority in terms of leadership can take various forms, and that one form of leadership which works in one situation may not work in another. There are a number of factors which can influence the effectiveness of a supervisor. These can be classified as job factors, and there are 2 basic kinds. The first is external job factors, which are influences derived from social pressures on the organization. The other is internal job factors, which are matters relating to specific operations within the company. Some common external job factors are increased demands for minority employment, increased rate of unionization of the workforce, and greater public awareness of the need for environmental protection. What kind of job factors would you consider the size of the company and its product? Yes. Internal job factors, as we said, are those factors which directly bear upon the situation in the company. Internal factors come into play in the basic supervisor-employee relationship. External factors, on the other hand, tend to affect the company as a whole and only indirectly influence supervisor-employee relations. As a supervisor, you are in a central position in the company organization. You provide the link between the rank-and-file employees and the higher management staff. As such, it is your responsibility to express the desires of the management to your employees and also to represent fairly employee needs to management. Before any work can take place, which function must a supervisor perform? Yes. Perhaps you're beginning to see that there are some very important aspects to supervision, and that many things are necessary to make an effective supervisor. All of these influences, job factors, authority, the basic functions of all supervisors, and their role in the company structure, will dictate to a certain extent a supervisor's ability to function. Proper authority is necessary for a supervisor to work effectively. He or she must also be technically able to perform the specific job requirements and at the same time be able to perform the basic supervisory functions. A great deal of a supervisor's success, however, will be determined by his or her ability to work with or manage human resources. The methods used to get the job done could influence the quality of the work. While this is obviously of prime importance, several other elements must be considered by the supervisor. Improper workloads, ignoring potential solutions offered by employees, indifference to interpersonal relationships, all can influence both the rate at which the job is done and, just as importantly, the quality of the work. At the basic level, what must a supervisor have to function effectively? Correct. Good supervisors take into account the human element of production. They must be aware to a certain extent of the needs of employees. These needs include not only good working conditions, good wages, and fringe benefits, but also various personal needs. Some of these are a feeling of pride in one's work, a sense of recognition for good performance, and a feeling of job security. Which is a more accurate description of a supervisor's position? There are two very important processes involved in all supervisory functions. One is called the delegation of authority, and the other is the decision-making process. A person's effectiveness as a supervisor is quickly indicated by how he or she performs in these areas. The delegation of authority means more than it might appear. Basically, it is the giving of authority to subordinates to perform certain actions or to make certain decisions. Supervisors who are unable or unwilling to delegate authority soon find themselves limited in their effectiveness. A certain amount of responsibility can be given to lower employees if the proper care is taken. By doing so, a supervisor can spend more time being a complete and effective manager, which illustrates a supervisor who has learned to delegate authority properly. The second important process is the decision-making process. Basically, the decision-making process is a matter of recognizing the existence of a problem, analyzing it, reaching alternative solutions, and then implementing the one that seems most correct. It is involved in every phase of the supervisor's activity. The ability to make sound decisions should also be encouraged in all employees. Occasionally, the problem might not be what it appears on the surface. For example, a problem with bickering employees might turn out to be more than a case of personality conflicts, and instead be due to a case of undefined job duties or overlapping responsibilities, which you must solve. What are the four parts of the decision-making process? Correct. After you've put the solution to a problem into effect, you should then make it a practice to follow it up. In this way, you can make sure that your solution was correct and that the problem is truly solved. You probably can remember cases where you should have done this but didn't. One of the more important supervisory skills is the ability to use the right method to motivate your employees. In a later program, we will learn more about the various ways to motivate an employee. By properly combining the right leadership style and the proper motivational technique, a supervisor will be able to maintain a smooth working pattern. It may be clear to you by now that there is no one perfect method of supervision and motivation. Which of these cases shows a motivational technique that is usually not very effective in the long run? There are several other important points to being an effective supervisor. Related to motivational techniques is the area of employee discipline. Generally speaking, disciplinary actions involve several stages, including both informal and official warnings, specific disciplinary action, and follow-up activities. We will also examine the various alternatives to formal disciplinary actions, such as reprimands. What do formal disciplinary actions consist of? Fundamental to a supervisor's function is his or her ability to communicate. Both oral and written communications will be covered in some depth. Additionally, you will learn about the barriers to communication and how they can be overcome. What is an alternative to formal disciplinary actions? Evaluating the performance of employees is also an important function for any supervisor. Coverage of this aspect will center upon the setting of performance goals, the use of performance appraisals, and developing employees by using a performance review. A supervisor must also be aware of the grievances and complaints of employees. No doubt this area of discussion will be one of the most valuable for the new supervisor. We will look at typical grievance procedures as well as what the supervisor can learn from them. What is one means of developing employees? One area that a supervisor is usually not involved in is that of determining wage scales. Most supervisors have little experience with payment of wages because it is usually handled by other levels of management in the organization, such as at the policy-making level. A supervisor must understand, however, the basic elements involved in this area. Such things as job evaluation, incentive wages, and the basis for salary determination are examined in this unit. Which employee to select during employment interviews is a difficult task at best. We'll examine some of the things a supervisor should look for during the interview and how to actually conduct the interview. Additionally, we will discuss the orientation procedures a supervisor should conduct with new employees. What is usually not determined by supervisors? No one can doubt the tremendous impact unionization has had on the industrial organization. As the supervisor of an organized workforce, you will come in contact with the union in several areas, which we will cover. What process is conducted by supervisors? Some of these areas are the major types of union agreements or contracts, as they're often referred to, how the supervisor interrelates with the union officials, and the importance of the supervisor working within the provisions of the union contract. What we have just examined is only a sampling of the material to be covered. In fact, there are many things about supervision that you will learn only once you're out on the job. There is one important quality about supervision that must not be forgotten, and that is to look to the future. In the final programs of this course, we will cover some of the following ideas that are important to today's supervisor. The supervisor today must be extremely adaptable to ever-changing production methods and technology. Changes in technology are rapidly altering the role of the first-line supervisor and his or her role in the management structure. Your success as a supervisor and possible advancement will be determined in part by how you can adapt to these conditions. Another changing area is governmental and public concern over the health and safety of the environment. You're no doubt aware of many of the bills passed in both state and federal legislatures regarding safety, pollution, and manufacturers' responsibility. There are also the changes brought about by the demands for equal opportunity employment by various minorities. Important governmental legislation regarding the employment of women and other minorities will be examined. Despite these changes, however, the fundamental job of the supervisor is to manage employees effectively and fairly. As you go through these programs, See how the material relates to your own position.